Can I get some coffee?
In a while. Let's talk about the lineup.
I'm really thirsty. I used to dehydrate as a kid. One time it got so bad my piss come out like snot. I'm not kidding. It was all thick and
I'll get you
gooey.
coffee. Get me one, too, while you're at it.
That guy is tense. Tension is a killer. I used to be in a barbershop quartet in Skokie, Illinois. The baritone was this guy named Kip Diskin. Big fat guy. I mean like orca fat. He was so stressed in the morning, you know.
Verbal, you know we're trying to help you.
Sure, and I appreciate that. And I want to help you, Agent Kuyan. I like cops. I would have liked to have been a Fed myself, but my CP always...
Verbal, you're not telling us everything. I know you know something.
I told the DA everything I know.
Verbal, I know you like Keaton. I know you think he's a good man.
I know he was good.
He was a corrupt cop.
Sure, 15 years ago, but he was a good thief. Anyway, the cops wouldn't let him go legit.
Dean Keaton was a piece of shit.
Are you trying to get a rise out of me, Agent Kuyan?
I just want to hear your story.
It's all there. May I have a cigarette?
In a world overflowing with movies, we need a hero. Someone to separate the bad from the good.
Sounds like a job. Verbal diorama. Watches all the movies from comedy to drama. From the top roll sound. And don't forget the action. She'll watch until the end and then she'll give you her reaction. Movies you know, movies you don't. Prequel, sequels, remakes, and trivia and outtakes. Movies you know, movies you don't. Interesting stories, all the categories.
Hi everyone, I'm Em and welcome to Verbal Diorama, not Verbal Kint, episode 313, The Usual Suspects. This is the podcast that's all about the history and legacy of movies you know and movies you don't that might know who Keyser Söze is, but also isn't completely sure. Welcome to Verbal Diorama, whether you're a brand new listener to this podcast, whether you're a regular returning listener. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing to listen to this podcast. I'm so happy to have you here for the history and legacy of The Usual Suspects. Thank you for your continued support of this podcast. It genuinely means so much that people keep coming back to this podcast. And The Usual Suspects started, unlike so many movies do, with a name. But great things start with a name, like a podcast all about the history and legacy of movies you know and movies you don't, which started with the name, Verbal Diorama. Everything else came after, which is probably why the start of this podcast was so haphazard back in 2019. But back to The Usual Suspects, though. Not a usual suspect for this podcast, because it's a genre I rarely do episodes on. But as it turned out, The Usual Suspects would become one of the most widely celebrated neo-noir films of all time. Here's the trailer for The Usual Suspects.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
All right, you all know the drill.
And that was how it started. The five of us being brought in on a trumped-up charge to be leaned on by half-wits.
Number one, step forward.
It didn't make sense that I'd be there. I mean, these guys were hardcore hijackers.
Answer my question. You hit me in the back. Hello?
What the cops never figured out, and what I know now, was that these men would never break, never bend over for anybody.
You gonna charge me?
You don't put guys like that into a room together.
Let's get back to that truck.
Who knows what can happen?
I figure we owe it to ourselves to salvage a little dignity. Me and Fenster heard about a little job.
My employer requires your services, gentlemen. One job, 1 day's work. Very dangerous.
Close quarters, 10, maybe 20 men. Anybody who goes in there is not coming out alive.
Is there a problem?
I want to know why. 27 men died on that pier for what looks to be $91 million worth of dope that wasn't there.
This isn't life's in danger. He saw the devil.
Keyser Söze!
He mentioned Keyser Söze.
Who? Who's Keyser Söze?
Press 20. Do it now.
There is no Keyser Söze.
You never knew. That was his power.
He was in the harbor, killing many men.
You mention his name again, I'll kill you right now.
How do you shoot the devil in the back?
A gift from Mr. Söze.
You got my whole life in here, everything I've ever done since I was 18.
Everybody I've ever worked with at a time.
Keaton always said, I don't believe in God, but I'm afraid of him.
He's here.
Well, I believe in God. And the only thing that scares me is Keyser Söze. And like that, he's gone.
Roger Verbal Kint is the sole survivor of a bombing and shootout that leaves 27 people dead. While his lawyer fights for his speedy release from police custody, Kint begrudgingly reveals the events leading up to the previous night's explosion to customs agent Dave Kuyan. Kuyan is determined to get to the truth no matter what it takes, particularly the truth about Dean Keaton, one of Kint's fellow suspects, and the target of his long-time vendetta. Kint's story begins to centre around the presence of a criminal mastermind named Keyser Söze. Kuyan at first doubts the existence of the boogeyman of the criminal underworld, but as Kint continues his story, Kuyan eventually realises just how deep this particular rabbit hole goes. Let's run through the cast of this movie. We have Kevin Spacey as Roger Verbal Kint, Gabriel Byrne as Dean Keaton, Chaz Palminteri as Agent Dave Kuyan, Stephen Baldwin as Michael McManus, Benicio del Toro as Fred Fenster, Kevin Pollock as Todd Hockney, Pete Postlethwaite as Kobayashi, Susie Amis as Edie Finneran, Giancarlo Esposito as FBI agent Jeff Bayer, and Dan Hedaya as Sergeant Jeff Rabin. The Usual Suspects was written by Christopher McQuarrie and directed by Bryan Singer. And like I mentioned, The Usual Suspects is the rare movie where the name came first. Christopher McQuarrie was asked by a friend what his next script was about, and he read an article in Spy magazine called The Usual Suspects, thinking that was a great name for a movie. The phrase originated from Claude Rains' line in Casablanca. McQuarrie had grown up in Princeton Junction, New Jersey, and knew a guy a year older called Bryan Singer, who made 8mm home movies along with another school friend called Ethan Hawke. McQuarrie would do his friend a solid and star in one of these homemade movies, but his scene ended up on the cutting room floor, because teenage boys can be scathing. When McQuarrie was arrested for shoplifting the year before his senior year in high school, he was sentenced to a 7 p.m. curfew for a couple of months in the summer, and Singer would come over to his house to watch movies. They also spent time writing short stories and screenplays. The two lost touch the year after, but McQuarrie was surprised to hear from Singer in the early 90s after his short film Lion's Den had helped him raise $250,000 for his first full-length feature. But he needed a script. McQuarrie headed to LA, and the pair wrote Public Access, which later shared the Grand Jury Prize at the 1993 Sundance Film Festival. When asked by a reporter at Sundance what their next film was about, McQuarrie replied, "I guess it's about a bunch of criminals who meet in a police lineup," which incidentally was the first visual idea that he and Singer had for the poster. After Sundance, Singer was screening Public Access at a festival in Japan and thought he could secure financing for his next film. Singer called McQuarrie from Tokyo and asked him to write up The Usual Suspects idea. McQuarrie was working in the copy room of an LA law firm at the time, and he would use much of his experiences working there to shape the screenplay for The Usual Suspects. He also worked at a detective agency, and this also heavily influenced the depictions of criminals and law enforcement officials. Many of his former work colleagues inspired the characters' names. One of the lawyers at the firm had a very striking and unique name, Keyser Söze. McQuarrie couldn't name the villain after his former boss. Söze is taken from a Turkish idiom, which I'm going to mispronounce terribly, Söze bokmak, meaning to drown in a sea of words or talking too much. Coincidentally, just like the name Verbal. Also coincidentally, why this podcast is called What It Is. Keyser Söze is a mythic figure in the underworld, described as a spook story criminals tell their kids at night. He is a Turkish drug dealer who gunned down his wife and children rather than let them fall into the hands of his Hungarian rivals, before exacting vengeance on the crew and disappearing into the night, never to be heard from directly again. But Söze was also based on a real-life criminal. In 1971, in an extensive mansion in Westfield, New Jersey, neighbours reported to police they'd not seen a family for over a month, and the lights, left on constantly in the home, had burned out. As officers forced their way into the property, they came across a gruesome sight in the house's main ballroom. 4 bodies encased in sleeping bags. The bodies of Helen List and her 3 teenage children, Fred, John and Patricia. Helen's mother, Alma, was found dead in an attic apartment. All of them had been killed by a single bullet to the head, except for John, who had been shot 10 times. The only member of the family not accounted for was the father, John List Sr., a devout Lutheran and accountant, had previously announced the family was going on holiday and then disappeared, but not before removing his face from every photograph in the home and leaving a confession in his study addressed to his pastor. In the confession, he admitted to losing his job and owing $11,000 on the mortgage, stealing from his mother, and killing his whole family so they didn't have to lose their home and live a life of poverty. His reasoning for murdering them was that by doing so, they were going to a better place, and by the time he reunited with them in heaven, they'd have forgiven him. Police tracked his car to Kennedy Airport, but there was no record of him taking flight. A year later, an arson attack on the house would destroy any remaining evidence. And like that, he's gone. He remained on America's Most Wanted list, but was never captured. 18 years later, in 1989, America's Most Wanted commissioned a bust of John List Sr. using age progression technology, and remarkably, a woman in Denver, Colorado, called in to say it looked like her old neighbour, who was going by the name Robert Clark. Clark had since moved to Richmond, Virginia, was a devout Lutheran, was also an accountant, and was also having some money trouble. History, it seems, always repeats itself. But on the tip, Robert Clark was apprehended by law enforcement and denied he was John List, until he was fingerprinted and it became apparent he was John List. John List was sentenced to 5 life terms in 1990 for the 5 murders he committed, and he wound up dying from pneumonia in 2008 in a hospital near the New Jersey State Prison. He insisted until his dying day that forgiveness awaited him in heaven from the family he had murdered. Keyser Söze, of course, was never caught, but the story of this motley crew of a 9-up-turned criminal gang with a non-linear storyline and an unreliable narrator wasn't the easiest script to sell. They sent the script to over 50 different companies, all of whom passed. A connection from Cannes, Robert Jones, the producer from the German group WMG, offered to finance the movie, so believing they had the financing in place, they moved forward with casting the movie. They wanted to get a big-name cast, but the limited funds meant casting well below the actors' usual pay. Verbal Kint had been written with Kevin Spacey in mind, but Spacey was interested in playing the role of Dean Keaton or Dave Kuyan, and he was surprised to be offered the role of Kint. He would meet with experts and doctors to portray the character's cerebral palsy accurately and how it could fit into the movie. The character was written in the script as having cerebral palsy, with physical limitations affecting his left hand and left foot, causing him to walk with a limp. This is one of the most crucial elements of the film's famous twist ending. The disability is revealed to be completely fake. Verbal drops the disabled act as he strolls from the station. The portrayal of cerebral palsy as part of Verbal's disguise serves the narrative purpose of making him appear harmless and non-threatening to both the other characters and the audience. His apparent physical limitations, combined with his nervous, cooperative demeanour, help sell the illusion that he's just a small-time con man rather than the criminal mastermind he actually is. This aspect of Verbal's character has been somewhat controversial over the years because it uses disability as a plot device and deception. The film presents fake disability as part of an elaborate ruse to mislead law enforcement and audiences about the character's true identity and capabilities. Now, in the 80s and 90s, you couldn't really go anywhere without getting a Baldwin in your movie or around your movie. And this is no exception, because one of the famous Baldwin brothers, this time Stephen Baldwin, had a particularly memorable audition experience because he was frustrated with the roles he was getting in indie films. And when he met with Bryan Singer directly, he went into a 15-minute tirade telling him what it was like to work with difficult directors. After Baldwin finished his rant, Singer told him exactly what he expected and wanted from the actors, which actually impressed Baldwin and helped him land the role of Michael McManus. Gabriel Byrne was cast as Dean Keaton after being recommended by Kevin Spacey, bringing his established dramatic credibility to anchor the ensemble. Byrne was already a well-known actor from films like Miller's Crossing, so his involvement helped legitimise the project, but he was dealing with some personal problems at the time, so the filmmakers agreed to shoot the film in Los Angeles to accommodate Byrne's schedule. Academy Award-nominated Pete Postlethwaite was one of Britain's most well-respected character actors, and he could be guaranteed to bring gravitas and a menacing presence to the role of the mysterious Kobayashi. Chaz Palminteri was unavailable for the role of Agent Dave Kuyan. The role was offered to Christopher Walken and Robert De Niro, who both declined. Al Pacino also turned down the role. When Palminteri became available, he was only free for a week, and all of his filming was completed during that time. But his signing was actually integral to the financial future of the film. They cast the 5 principal actors of the film: Pete Postlethwaite, Stephen Baldwin, Kevin Spacey, Chaz Palminteri and Gabriel Byrne. And then they found out the German financier actually didn't have the money. So they had to go back to the 5 actors, explain that they had a financial issue, and ask them to sign a 10-day option to commit to the movie. All 5 did it, and that combined star power helped attract other financiers to pay for the movie. Polygram Film Entertainment and Spelling Films International offered $6.5 million and agreed to purchase the film once it was done. In other words, they did a negative pickup deal. So then the movie was bank financed. So it meant that Bryan Singer got his financial deal and also got a lot of freedom and power because the money was coming from the bank as long as the movie stayed on schedule and on budget. Benicio del Toro wasn't the first choice for Fred Fenster. The part was written for someone like Harry Dean Stanton. Del Toro didn't want to audition because he doesn't like them, so he was cast without one. And when he realised Fenster was going to die midway through the movie, he decided to bring his own unique interpretation to Fred Fenster. His distinctive mumbling delivery style became one of the most memorable aspects of his performance, and this was largely improvised during the production with the blessing of Bryan Singer. It's important to add that Del Toro never once strays from what's written in the script, but delivers it in such a way that makes it unintelligible but memorable. There was a lot of improvisation on set and a lot of reaction to stuff that just randomly happened during filming, like Stephen Baldwin being hit by a lit cigarette in the face, a genuine reaction that stayed in the movie. Kevin Pollak was known for his work in comedies and A Few Good Men, and brought both dramatic chops and his experience with ensemble work to the role of Todd Hockney. He also improvised a lot of lines for comedic effect. The casting was crucial because Singer needed actors who could work well together as an ensemble and handle McQuarrie's intricate dialogue-heavy screenplay. The 5 main actors spent weeks rehearsing together before filming to build the chemistry and camaraderie that was essential for the story to work. This rehearsal period was particularly important since much of the film's success depended on the believable relationships between these career criminals who had supposedly just met in a police lineup. That didn't mean everyone always got on, though. Baldwin and Pollak would acknowledge that their long-standing feud with each other began on the set of this film. Though neither actor directly states what caused their animosity toward each other, Pollak does mention that Baldwin, in an attempt to stay in character as McManus, would go around acting tough and sometimes bully the other actors. Baldwin does admit that he was bullying towards Pollak on the film, with their numerous standoff confrontations with each other shown on screen. McQuarrie worked on about 9 drafts of the script over 6 months, and he had the idea for a twist, and the twist was what made the whole thing worth doing. Originally, when he started writing, it was going to be a story about 5 felons who meet in a lineup, and the poster would be the 5 guys in a lineup, the name would be The Usual Suspects, and the tagline was "All of you can go to hell." Singer fully admits to taking inspiration from Reservoir Dogs. It was McQuarrie who suggested, what if this all came off this bulletin board? And that became the reason to make the movie. To do this big reveal, they needed to go back into the movie and find every scrap of footage, alternate takes, creepy shots, interesting shots to convince the audience that Gabriel Byrne's Dean Keaton was Keyser Söze. They used outtakes, bloopers, audio tracks, whatever they could find to substantiate Dave Kuyan's suspicions about Keaton, to make the audience feel and truly believe that they're getting the climax with Gabriel Byrne's reveal as Keyser Söze. Singer didn't just want this in some audio exposition, he wanted viewers to see it narratively. Even Gabriel Byrne was initially told by Singer that he was Keyser Söze, to lend the authenticity to his performance, so he genuinely believed he was playing a character, playing this legendary villain, even persuading Byrne to stand in a trench coat with a pistol and fire down at the spot his character was supposed to be sitting in. It wasn't in the script, so Byrne questioned it, but Singer felt they needed an image of him as Söze. The Usual Suspects was filmed over 33 days in Los Angeles and San Pedro, and then 2 days in New York. The strict 35-day schedule was necessary to stay under budget. The cast spent an 18-hour day shooting the underground parking garage robbery. According to Byrne, by the next day, Singer didn't have all of the footage he wanted, but refused to stop filming in spite of the bonding company's threat to shut down the production. But The Usual Suspects' most iconic moment comes at the very start of the film, when the 5 potential criminals appear in a police lineup, asked to read a certain line, which rhymes with "Hand me the keys, you tucking block booker." The reactions and fits of laughter weren't scripted. This scene was supposed to be played completely straight and seriously, to show them all being defiant to the police. Christopher McQuarrie explained on Twitter that it was due to Benicio del Toro's flatulence during the take. The cast were erupting into fits of laughter after the smell permeated in such a way to be completely hilarious. It ended up solving a script issue of how these 5 men bond, and the lineup ended up becoming the bonding scene because of some stinky farts. Singer was originally frustrated, but the footage was genuinely funny. It showed the characters bonding, and it still fit the idea of them being defiant to the police. Cinematographer Newton Thomas Siegel collaborated with Bryan Singer for the first time on The Usual Suspects. The pair would work together again on X-Men and X-Men 2. Siegel's cinematography on the film, which is widely recognised as his career best, developed into a way of shooting dialogue scenes with a combination of slow, creeping zooms and dolly moves that ended in tight close-ups. The use of darkness in the film is to accentuate the lowest points for each of the characters, and the imperceptible zooms always have a sense of motion in limited space. While they were filming the climactic scene around the docks after dark, the authorities received an anonymous call saying there were either drugs or guns on the boat they were using, which was a 220-foot minesweeper once owned by the Kennedys. So the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, raided the boat and shut down the movie. One of the producers woke up the mayor, and the production got permission to carry on. This was a movie of incredible circumstance, but also incredible luck and privilege, because Bryan Singer had unprecedented freedom on this movie to not only make it exactly how he wanted to make it, but also make his final cut without any interference from anyone else. When you think of the usual suspects of this podcast, it's me, but also some other people too. And this is the perfect time to segue into the obligatory Keanu reference of this episode, which is where I try and link the movie that I'm featuring with Keanu Reeves, which is sometimes really difficult, especially like it was for this, because the usual suspects of this podcast is me, and then next in the lineup is Keanu Reeves, followed by Keanu Reeves, and Keanu Reeves. I'm not going to say who farted in our lineup though, but all I will say is I did eat baked beans that day. And yes, of course I fart in front of Keanu Reeves. He's the best of men. He's not going to care. a couple of episodes, I did an episode on Barbie, and I talked about how the marketing for that movie was genuinely one of the greatest examples of modern marketing, how they utilise social media and how they utilise a press tour. The Usual Suspects was back in 1995, but there was also a really interesting way they marketed this movie, because executives had problems pronouncing the name Keyser Söze, and they were worried that audiences would have the same problem. So the studio decided to promote that character's name. 2 weeks before the film debuted in theatres, Who is Keyser Söze posters appeared on bus stops, and TV spots told people how to say the character's name. And so, of course, people started talking about a character called Keyser Söze and about who is this guy, Keyser Söze. And of course, it made people want to go and see the movie. It led to the movie being shown out of competition at the 1995 Cannes Film Festival and then go on to become an indie darling at the box office. After an exclusive run in Los Angeles and New York on 3 screens on its opening weekend on the 18th of August 1995, it then opened in a further 39 screens, leading to its debut at 17th at the domestic box office. The Usual Suspects opened wide on the 15th of September 1995 and jumped up to 7th at the box office, staying in the top 10 for a further 4 weeks and peaking at 5th. It would end up grossing $23.3 million domestically in the US and $43.6 million internationally, for a total worldwide gross of $66.9 million, more than 10 times its original budget. It also has an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, with a consensus reading, expertly shot and edited. The Usual Suspects gives the audience a simple plot and then piles on layers of deceit, twists and violence before pulling out the rug from underneath. Roger Ebert, though, was one reviewer who didn't care much for the movie. In a review for the Chicago Sun-Times, he gave the film 1.5 stars out of 4, writing that it was confusing and uninteresting, quote, "to the degree that I do understand, I don't care," unquote. He also included the film in his most hated films list. But not many people agreed with him. And at the 68 Academy Awards, Kevin Spacey won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and Christopher McQuarrie won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. In his acceptance speech, Spacey said, quote, "Well, whoever Keyser Söze is, I can tell you he's gonna get gloriously drunk tonight," unquote. While Spacey is undoubtedly the star of the movie, it's really only after the fact that you realise this, and so to save the twist from being spoiled for others, he campaigned for, was nominated and won Best Supporting Actor rather than Best Actor. The film also was nominated for a BAFTA for Best Film and won 2 further BAFTAs, Best Original Screenplay and Best Editing. Spacey was also nominated for a Best Supporting Actor Golden Globe. Verbal Kint was voted the number 48 villain in AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains in June 2003, and the movie was named as the AFI's 10th Best Mystery Film. Bryan Singer's lawyer negotiated a brilliant deal for him on this movie. He fully controlled the movie. No one could fire him, no one could take it away, and Bryan Singer controls the rights of The Usual Suspects in perpetuity, which means nobody can make a sequel or a spin-off without Singer's approval or involvement. And this was also an unprecedented deal that rarely happens in Hollywood. But despite the movie telling us who Keyser Söze is, how much of the story can be believed? Did Söze make up the characters or the whole thing? Is he really Keyser Söze? Well, the sketch artist does a pretty convincing Kevin Spacey lookalike sketch, so at least we know that's true. The visual reveal of the sketch being Keyser Söze is purely based on a description, but it's hard to deny it's not a description of Kevin Spacey. The movie cleverly leaves pretty much everything else up for debate, apart from the fact that a character called Kobayashi probably doesn't look like Pete Postlethwaite. But then we know his name is definitely not Kobayashi from the Kobayashi porcelain mug. But you can't talk about this movie without the Bryan Singer and Kevin Spacey shaped elephant in the room, which does unfortunately sully this movie somewhat now. Singer has been accused of alleged sexual assault in several lawsuits, in 1997, 2014, 2017 and 2019, some of whom against minors. Singer paid a $150,000 settlement in 2017 against his alleged victim, Cesar Sanchez Guzman. Singer has never been convicted of any sexual assault. Kevin Spacey faced several accusations of sexual assault and sexual harassment in 2017 from at least 4 named accusers and various unnamed people from the set of House of Cards. Spacey denied all accusations and was found not liable in a 2022 civil lawsuit filed by one of his accusers, Anthony Rapp. In a separate criminal case, he was acquitted by a jury of sexual assault charges in London in 2023. In 2017, amidst the sexual misconduct allegations towards Spacey, Gabriel Byrne confirmed that production of The Usual Suspects was closed down for 2 days because Spacey made unwanted sexual advances towards a younger actor. Singer denied Spacey acted inappropriately on the set, but Kevin Pollak would later confirm in 2018 that Spacey engaged in sexual acts with Singer's then-boyfriend on set. It would lead to Singer and Spacey allegedly falling out for several years. It's always rubbish when good movies are tainted by association. However, the history and legacy of this movie stands it apart from the behaviour of its lead actor and its director. I knew the twist going into this movie. It is one of the most famous twists in cinema history, but even knowing it doesn't reduce the experience. It does make you question what you think you know, and it's a movie that benefits greatly from multiple viewings purely for that reason. Obviously, it launched Bryan Singer into the stratosphere. He next directed Apt Pupil, before moving on to one of the most influential comic book movies of all time, X-Men. Spacey too starred in some huge movies in the late 90s, including Seven and LA Confidential, before getting another Oscar for American Beauty in 1999. Singer and Spacey would reunite in 2006 for Superman Returns. Also in this movie, almost unrecognisable, Giancarlo Esposito, and also Cher's dad, Dan Hedaya, who was originally going to play a character called Captain Leo until he was cut to save time. So instead, he became Rabin. But mostly, this is a movie that lives and dies on its marketing, and it became a video hit and a cult classic. Former US President Bill Clinton was a huge fan, allegedly because his daughter Chelsea loved it. He apparently kept a copy on Air Force One. This was the millennial cult movie, a masterclass in suspension and misdirection, and proof, if anyone needed, that a great marketing campaign can make or break a movie. Would we even know who Keyser Söze is without the marketing? And are we 100% certain he is who we think he is? But I guess that's the question this movie keeps asking us. Thank you for listening. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on The Usual Suspects, and thank you for your continued support of this podcast. If you want to get involved and you want to help this podcast grow and reach more people, you could tell your friends and family. You can find me on social media at Verbal Diorama, where you can like posts, share posts, comment on posts, etc. It all helps. Or you can leave a rating or review wherever you found this podcast. The next episode of this podcast, well, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist, which is a line from this movie, but also kind of links into the next episode, which doesn't need an obligatory Keanu reference because it stars Keanu Reeves. It is one of my favourite Keanu Reeves performances, actually. And not only is Keanu Reeves great in the movie, he also goes up against the legendary Al Pacino. Please join me next episode on this podcast, where I'm going to be talking about the history and legacy of The Devil's Advocate. Now, if you enjoy what I do for this podcast, or you simply want to support an indie podcaster who does everything on her own, if you have some spare change, you can contribute to the upkeep of this podcast. Now, this podcast is free and always will be free, and you're under no obligation to help out. But if you do get value out of what I do, there are a couple of ways you can help if you have the means. You can make a one-off donation at verbaldiorama.com/tips, or you can subscribe to the Patreon at verbaldiorama.com/Patreon. All money made goes back into this podcast by paying for software subscriptions, website hosting, or new equipment. As always, a huge thank you to the patrons of Verbal Diorama. I could not do what I'd do without their support. Simon, Laurel, Derek, Kat, Andy, Mike, Luke, Michael, Scott, Brendan, Ian, Lisa, Sam, Jack, Dave, Stuart, Nicholas So, Kev, Heather, Danny, Stu, Brett, Philip M, Zenos, Sean, Rhino, Philip K, Adam, Elaine, Kyle, Aaron, and Connor. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email verbaldiorama@gmail.com. You can say hi, give feedback or suggestions. You can also go to verbaldiorama.com and fill out the contact form. I would love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this episode, if you want to talk about The Usual Suspects, or if you want to talk about any episode actually that I featured on this podcast, please feel free to get in touch. You can also get in touch with me on social media as well. As I mentioned, it's at Verbal Diorama. And finally,
Convince me. And tell me every last
Back when I was in that barbershop quartet in Skokie, Illinois. Where's your head, Agent Kuyan?
What we need to do is think. Think back.
I'm sure you've heard many tall tales.
Bricks Marlin.
This isn't right.
I just want to hear
Tell
your
me every
story.
last
It's
detail.
all there. And I'm telling it straight, I swear. Some guy in California, his name is Redfoot.
It's a gift from Mr. Söze.
Talk to me, Verbal. What about Redfoot?
Mr. Redfoot knew nothing. Using pawns.
Big, fat guy. I mean, like orca fat.
I was a lawyer.
Myths and legends have
Kobayashi.
I'll never see him
It's a
again. Back when I was
logistical
picking
nightmare.
beans in Guatemala, we used to make fresh coffee.
I know you thought he was a good man.
I know he was good.
And tell me every last detail.
Strangest thing.
How do you shoot the devil in the back?
This altar is protected from up on high by the prince.
And tell me every last
What about a
detail.
pretzel, man? What's your story?
There was a lawyer.
What lawyer, Verbal?
I am Mr. Kobayashi.
Kobayashi.
Tell me every last detail.
I work for Keyser Söze.
Convince me. Convince me. Convince me.
bye.
Movies you know.